Imagine a soul so broken, it's been shattered for centuries. An alpha king, cursed and fragmented, walking through existence with pieces of himself scattered across time. What if the only thing that could mend him wasn't power or magic, but the pure, unwavering love of an omega? The moon hung low over the jagged peaks of the obsidian realm, a cold sentinel over the desolate lands beneath. Shadows crept like silent predators across the ruined battlements of the once mighty throne, stretching from the fractured stone walls to the barren courtyards where echoes of grandeur had long since faded. In the center of it all, atop the blackened dais, sat the Alpha King, alone, a figure carved from shadow and sorrow, his gaze as cold and unyielding as the obsidian spires that framed him. A millennium had passed since the curse had taken root, unraveling the core of his being. Once, he had been a king of unmatched power, a ruler whose strength was rivaled only by his wisdom. Now, his essence was fragmented, broken shards of himself scattered across the void of his soul, leaving behind a husk draped in authority yet bereft of warmth. Even the wind, whispering across the heights, seemed reluctant to stir around him, as if it feared the echoes of the torment that lingered within. Alaric Varen, Alpha of the Obsidian Realm, was a man imprisoned by his own history. Centuries of conquest, of triumph and betrayal, had forged him into a predator feared by all, but it was the curse that had made him truly untouchable. He had lived countless lifetimes in solitude, a silent witness to the decay of loyalty and the fleeting nature of love. Yet despite every battle, every crown taken and lost, there was one war he could never win, the war within himself. The first cracks had formed not on the battlefield but in the sanctum of his mind. Memories, once vivid and whole, now came in splintered fragments, snippets of laughter and sorrow, of love and betrayal, all fractured into shards that refused to coalesce. At times, he would glimpse his past self in these fragments, a man capable of tenderness and connection, and feel a pang of longing so fierce it would drive him to the edge of madness. But he had long ago buried that part of him beneath layers of dominance and aggression. To feel again was a risk he could not afford. To love was to open the gates of ruin. Tonight, the throne chamber was suffused with a quiet dread, a stillness so absolute it pressed against his skin like a second layer of armor. Alaric's amber eyes, molten and sharp, scanned the darkness. He was always alert, always aware, even when he appeared inert. His claws, hidden beneath finely crafted gloves, twitched with a restless energy that no amount of meditation could contain. Centuries of isolation had not softened his edge. They had honed it, made him more dangerous than ever. And yet, something lingered beyond the familiar veil of his solitude. Something he could not identify. A whisper, faint and delicate, tickled the edges of his consciousness, threading through the centuries of self-imposed exile. He ignored it at first, dismissing it as the frailty of an exhausted mind, the remnants of old dreams clawing at the darkened walls. But the whisper persisted, insistent and warm, unlike any threat or betrayal he had encountered. It was neither a weapon nor a lie. It carried an undercurrent of truth he could not yet place. In that moment, Alaric allowed himself a brief glimpse into the emptiness that had become his reality. A hollow expanse of corridors and chambers, echoes of voices long silenced, shadows of those who had tried and failed to breach the armor around his heart. Generations of Omegas, gifted and ordinary alike, had attempted to reach him. All had faltered, all had turned away, broken by the intensity of his darkness. The curse he bore was not merely a matter of strength, it was the slow unraveling of a soul, and he had long since accepted that he would never be whole again. Yet tonight, despite centuries of certainty, a ripple of something unfamiliar stirred beneath the surface. Alaric's instincts, honed and unforgiving, bristled with an awareness that was both foreign and alarming. Somewhere beyond the stone walls, beyond the jagged towers, there was a presence. A single life force moving with the quiet confidence of someone who did not yet understand the danger they approached. It was small, faint, almost insignificant in comparison to the weight of his own existence, but it was there, and that was enough. Hours passed as the moon traced its arc across the sky, indifferent to the turmoil below. Alaric remained perched upon his throne, a king encased in shadow, listening. The presence drew closer, a heartbeat among 1,000, a faint warmth in the cold abyss. His claws twitched again. Every instinct screamed at him to strike, to extinguish the intrusion before it could breach the sanctity of his domain. But even as the darkness within him roared for violence, a flicker of something else, a memory, a whisper of what had once been, surfaced. Alaric rose from his throne, his movements deliberate, predatory. The echoes of his boots against the stone floor were heavy, measured, announcing his presence as surely as a lion might its roar. He emerged into the hall, amber eyes sweeping the shadows. Nothing. Just the faint scent of life, delicate yet stubborn, winding through the chamber like a persistent wind. He traced it to the outer gate, his mind taut with anticipation and uncharacteristic curiosity. And then he saw her. She stood there, in the pale wash of moonlight spilling through the archway, her form slight yet unflinching. Her eyes, a vivid shade of violet, held a depth that seemed to pierce through centuries of guarded solitude. Her hair, dark as the midnight sky, cascaded around her shoulders in waves that seemed to absorb the light, yet her presence radiated warmth, defying the cold shadows that had claimed this place. She was unarmed, unassuming, yet every step she had taken toward him had carried the weight of purpose. Alaric felt the first stirrings of something dangerous and intoxicating, a sensation he had long believed lost to him. It was not desire, not yet, nor was it fear. It was recognition, primal and deep, as if some ancient part of him, hidden beneath the fractures and the curse, had been awakened by the sheer certainty of her presence. He had known many Omegas in his time, but none had touched him like this. None had approached him without hesitation, yet without reverence. She did not tremble, did not cower. She simply existed, and in her existence was a challenge he could not ignore. "Who are you?" His voice was a low rumble, roughened by centuries of silence and command, yet threaded with a faint tremor that betrayed his centuries of isolation. He expected defiance, fear, or flight. Instead, she met his gaze steadily, the violet of her eyes unwavering in the face of his fiery amber stare. "I am Ilara," she said softly, her voice a melody in the silence. "I've come for you." For a heartbeat, Alaric allowed disbelief to flicker across his features. "Come for me? Why? You do not know what you are stepping into." "I do," she replied simply, a subtle certainty lacing her tone. "And I am not afraid." The words struck him with the force of a lightning strike, a warmth cutting through the endless cold that had encased his soul. No one had ever said such a thing to him. No one had dared. Ilara's unwavering confidence, her quiet conviction, became a weight that pressed against the shattered walls around his heart. And in that pressure, Alaric felt a tremor, a crack in the armor he had spent centuries building. He turned away, pacing the cold hall, struggling against a tide he did not understand. Memories surfaced, jagged and uncontrolled. A hand held too briefly, a smile long forgotten, laughter stolen by time. Centuries of loss and despair clawed at him, and for the first time in 1,000 years, he felt fragile, vulnerable, human. The sensation terrified him, yet it drew him closer to her presence, a paradox he could not reconcile. "You should leave," he warned, his voice low, laden with menace and something else he could not name. "Before it's too late for you." "I cannot," Ilara said, taking a careful step forward. "Because I see you, Alaric, the real you, and I will not turn away." He froze, the weight of her words settling deep within his fractured soul. For centuries, no one had looked beyond the shadow, beyond the wrath, beyond the curse. And yet here she was, an ordinary Omega, daring to challenge everything he had become, everything he had lost. The first flicker of something unthinkable, a connection, sparked between them. And as the cold moonlight bathed her form, illuminating a warmth he had long believed unreachable, Alaric realized, with a mixture of awe and fear, that his solitude had ended. The journey that would either heal or destroy him had begun. 1,000 years of shadow met a single spark of unwavering light. And for the first time, Alaric Varen, the Alpha King whose soul had been fragmented by millennia of pain, felt the tremors of hope. The wind carried whispers through the obsidian halls, soft as a lover's sigh, yet sharp enough to stir even the oldest shadows. Alaric had returned to his throne, restless and unsettled. His amber eyes fixed on the pale glow of the moon spilling through fractured windows. Every instinct told him to obliterate the intrusion, to cast the Omega from his domain before curiosity could spiral into vulnerability. Yet he found himself waiting, listening, haunted by a faint thread of certainty he could not name. Ilara stood at the edge of the grand hall, her heart pounding with measured anticipation. The air around Alaric thrummed with ancient power, a tangible pulse she could feel even from where she knelt, bowing not in fear but in respect. She had known, since the moment she had glimpsed the ruins of his throne from afar, that he was unlike any other. He was danger incarnate, yet beneath the ferocity she had sensed the cracks, the remnants of a man shattered by 1,000 years of loss. He was the Alpha King, yes, but he was also a soul crying out for healing. Long before her arrival, the elders of her pack had spoken of the prophecy in hushed tones, their voices tinged with reverence and fear. An Omega born under the violet crescent, unique among her kind, would one day appear at the edge of darkness to reweave the shattered soul of an Alpha King lost to time. No one believed the prophecy could truly manifest. It had been whispered across centuries, more legend than reality, often dismissed as fairy tales for the naive. Yet Ilara had felt its pull since she could remember, a silent insistence in her veins, a calling she could neither explain nor resist. She had prepared for this moment for years, honing her awareness, learning to navigate the subtle currents of alpha energy, mastering her instinctive connection to the spiritual threads that bound the world. Yet nothing could have fully readied her for the raw intensity radiating from the man before her. Alaric Varen was a force of nature, a storm wrapped in flesh, and she was a solitary spark standing on the precipice of centuries of shadow. "Why are you here?" Alaric's voice cut through the silence, low and roughened with centuries of disuse. It carried both warning and fascination, an almost imperceptible tremor that betrayed the slightest fraying of his control. "I told you," Ilara replied softly, stepping closer despite the instinctive caution that prickled at her skin. "I came for you, to help you, to see you whole again." The words hung in the air like a fragile lantern, illuminating the darkness that clung to Alaric's soul. He froze, a predator caught off guard, sensing danger yet drawn to it in a way that defied reason. No Omega had ever spoken with such certainty, such quiet insistence. Normally, their presence would incite him to dominance, to test and break them with the weight of his authority. But Ilara did not flinch. She did not beg. She simply existed, steady, unwavering, alive with a light he had forgotten could exist in his world. "You cannot know what that entails," he murmured, his eyes narrowing as if to pierce her very essence. "The curse. It is older than any kingdom, older than time itself. Does not forgive, does not forget, and it does not yield." "I do not expect it to," she whispered. "I do not ask for the curse to end. I only ask for you to let me reach the parts of you that have been lost, bits of you buried beneath fear and rage and sorrow. That is my purpose, and I will not leave until I have tried." The declaration struck him with an unfamiliar ache. So many had tried and failed. So many Omegas had come, their eyes filled with pity or fear, and all had been swept away by the weight of his centuries-long torment. And yet, She remained, unshaken, resolute. A flicker of hope, fragile and wild, began to stir in a part of him long thought dead. Alaric's instincts screamed at him to reject it, to destroy it before it could unravel him further. But curiosity, sharp and insistent, gnawed at the edges of his mind. A part of him, buried deep, fragmented and hesitant, longed to believe her, to test the impossible, that she could reach him, touch the shards of his soul, and awaken something he thought lost forever. "You speak as though you understand me," he said. His voice softer now, the tremor more pronounced. "Do you truly know what you are stepping into?" "I do," she said again, her eyes steady, luminous with certainty. "I know the risks, and I accept them. Because I see you, not the Alpha King the world fears, not the shadow your enemies speak of, but the man beneath. The man I am meant to help." A tense silence filled the hall. Alaric studied her, the raw honesty in her gaze cutting through the fortress of centuries he had built. He sensed no deception, no hidden motives. Only truth, only conviction, only a hope. "You are foolish," he said finally, a wry edge creeping into his tone, though the warning remained. "Foolish and brave beyond reason. I should cast you out before the darkness that binds me consumes you." Elara did not step back. She allowed the tension to wash over her, a storm she did not fear. "Perhaps," she admitted softly, "but if I leave now, I may never get the chance again. And I would rather face 1,000 curses than abandon someone who could be whole again." The words lingered in the cold hall, wrapping around the edges of his fractured heart like an unseen thread. For centuries, Alaric had believed he was beyond salvation, that he was doomed to wander the empty corridors of his soul, haunted by the remnants of a life he had lost before it had truly begun. And yet, in the unwavering determination of one ordinary Omega, he felt the beginnings of something he had long thought impossible, a glimmer of hope. He paced the length of the hall, restless and agitated, yet drawn irresistibly toward her presence. Every step echoed through the cavernous chamber, a rhythm that matched the pulse of her determination. Memories began to surface, small and fragmented, triggered by the mere existence of her courage. Laughter stolen centuries ago, moments of tenderness erased by rage and sorrow, the fleeting warmth of connection, all rose like ghosts, brushing against the edges of his mind. "You do not understand," he said finally, halting before her, amber eyes narrowed, yet softened with a vulnerability he scarcely recognized. "I have lived 1,000 lifetimes in this shadow. I have seen every attempt at reaching me fail, every bond broken, every hand that sought mine, cut away by the weight of what I carry. Why should you succeed where all others have perished?" Ilara's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, gentle yet unwavering. "Because I do not seek to succeed for the sake of power or pride. I seek only to help. And because I believe you are worth it." The words struck deeper than any blade, deeper than any curse. Alaric's chest tightened, a sensation both terrifying and unfamiliar. He had spent centuries perfecting his armor, perfecting the persona that repelled connection, that repelled vulnerability. And yet here it was cracking. Shards of him, dormant and broken, responded to her words with an ache he could not deny. He turned away, pacing once more, hands clenched at his sides. The hall seemed impossibly vast, the shadows pressing close, yet within him, a subtle shift had begun. Something ancient and fragile stirred, a memory of light, of warmth, of belonging. And though he refused to acknowledge it, the presence of Elara had planted a seed, faint and trembling, in the heart of his desolation. "You will be tested," he murmured almost to himself. "And you will fail. Others have tried. Others have perished. Do you understand that?" "I do," she whispered, stepping closer, undeterred. "But I will not turn away. Not now, not ever." For a long moment, the hall was silent except for the distant sigh of the wind, And then Alaric spoke, a note of surrender threading through his words. Perhaps we shall see. The Alpha King did not know what awaited him. He did not know whether the prophecy would hold true, whether Ilara's presence could truly begin to mend the fractures of a soul fractured by millennia of pain. But for the first time in countless centuries, he felt the stirring of possibility, the faint, dangerous hope that the shadow that had ruled his existence might one day be lifted, replaced by something far more profound: connection, warmth, and the slow, painstaking rebirth of trust. Ilara stepped closer, the faint glimmer of her presence illuminating the cavernous darkness around them. And though the path ahead would be treacherous, fraught with resistance and peril, she felt the pulse of destiny in every heartbeat. The prophecy had not been mistaken. She was here. She had arrived. And she would not leave until she had begun to weave together the fragments of a soul lost to time. Outside, the moon traced its arc across the night sky, a silent witness to the beginning of an extraordinary journey. A journey that would defy centuries of despair, break through the walls of the unyielding Alpha, and awaken a love that neither time nor curse could ever diminish. And as the first light of hope touched the jagged halls of the Obsidian realm, Alaric Varen, the Alpha King, felt the faintest tremor in his chest. A flicker of life, a spark of possibility, the whisper of a soul beginning to stir. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to subscribe. It's what keeps us motivated to share even more adventures with you. Dawn had not yet broken over the Obsidian realm, yet the pale glow of the moon lingered stubbornly on the horizon, casting the ruined spires in an ethereal silver. Alaric Varen, Alpha King of a kingdom built on shadow and loss, remained at the highest battlement, gazing into the vast expanse of nothingness. The chill of the wind did little to stir him. He had grown accustomed to the cold, both of the air and the heart. Yet beneath the familiar detachment, a quiet disturbance had taken root, an awareness of life, of warmth, of something unaccounted for. Ilara approached silently, her footsteps soft against the jagged stone, yet carrying a certainty that demanded recognition. She did not call to him, did not announce herself. She merely entered his presence, as one might step into a darkened room, confident that light could find its way even in the deepest shadows. Her violet eyes held the unflinching determination of one who had been guided for a lifetime by destiny itself. She did not fear the intensity in Alaric's gaze. Instead, she met it with quiet resolve. Alaric turned, sensing her even before his mind fully registered her presence. The air between them hummed with tension, part threat, part invitation, a dangerous electricity neither could deny. "You persist," he said, voice low and dangerous, carrying the weight of centuries. "Why?" Ilara did not falter. She stepped closer, her hands folded loosely before her, radiating calm that contrasted sharply with the storm of his presence. "Because I see you," she said simply. "Not the Alpha everyone fears. Not the shadow of the curse. I see the man beneath it all." He studied her, the lines of his jaw tight with conflicting emotions. Fury, curiosity, and something that teetered on vulnerability warred within him. Centuries of solitude had made him sharp, guarded, unyielding. Yet there was an undeniable pull to her, something he could neither name nor resist. "You do not understand," he murmured, voice tight. "There is nothing beneath the shadow. There is only emptiness." "Then let me fill it," she replied softly, taking another measured step closer. "I am not afraid of the emptiness. I will not turn away because it frightens me. I have come for you, Alaric, because I believe even a fractured soul can be mended." Her words, tender yet resolute, struck him with a force he could not deflect. He had been alone for a millennium, each year a careful layering of defense, each day a repetition of survival. He had long believed that connection, affection, and trust were luxuries lost to him forever. And yet, before him, stood someone who defied all expectation, someone who saw not a king, not a monster, but a man who had been shattered and abandoned by time itself. Alaric's claws flexed beneath his gloves, his muscles taut with instinctual tension. He wanted to strike, to test the limits of her resolve, to remind her that she had entered a world ruled by shadows. Yet he did not. She had already passed through the first threshold, the one few could survive. She had faced the aura of pain he exuded without trembling. And that, more than anything else, unsettled him. "You are brave, foolishly brave," he said, finally breaking the silence. "Or perhaps naive. Do you truly believe your presence can alter what centuries of suffering have cemented?" "I believe in what cannot be seen," she said, eyes steady, voice unwavering. "I believe in hope, even when it seems impossible. And I believe in you." The words reverberated in the cold air between them, unyielding as the stone beneath their feet. Alaric's chest tightened, an unfamiliar ache spreading through him, a warmth, subtle and dangerous, that he had long thought extinct. He turned away, pacing the battlement, as if movement could stave off the rising storm within. Memories, long buried beneath layers of shadow and curse, flickered at the edges of his mind. Laughter, warmth, fleeting moments of intimacy, all shattered, fragmented, incomplete. And yet, in her presence, they seemed almost within reach. "You speak as though this will be simple," he said, finally stopping, amber eyes piercing her. "It will not. Nothing about me is simple." "I do not seek simplicity," she replied, her voice soft, yet carrying the strength of certainty. "I seek only the truth beneath the shadow. The truth of you. And I will not leave until I have found it." Alaric's fingers flexed into fists at his sides. The very air around him seemed to tighten with anticipation, as if the realm itself held its breath. He had faced armies, treachery and betrayal, yet none had unsettled him so profoundly as the quiet determination of one ordinary Omega who refused to yield. "You will be tested," he murmured, his tone almost a whisper. "And I will not make it easy." "I do not expect ease," she said. "I only expect honesty. And the courage to allow it." The Alpha's jaw tightened. He had not known honesty in centuries, not in the presence of anyone. His life had been a series of battles, each one leaving scars that no time could heal. And yet, here she stood, offering not pity, not fear, but unwavering faith. A single spark in the vast, unending darkness of his existence. "You may not survive this," he said finally, voice low, almost a growl. "I am not what you think you know." "Then I will endure," she said, taking a careful step closer. "Because I will not leave. I will not falter. I will be here for you, even when the darkness tests every part of you." For the first time in centuries, Alaric felt the stirrings of something he had long believed lost. Vulnerability. Connection. The faintest glimmer of hope. He turned away, pacing the length of the battlement, struggling against the tide of emotions she had awakened. Memories, jagged and fragmented, surged to the surface. Hands held too briefly, laughter stolen by time, moments of warmth erased by despair. Each fragment was a painful reminder of what he had lost, and what, perhaps, could be reclaimed. Ilara followed his movements, careful not to crowd him, careful not to overstep, yet close enough that her presence remained a constant, reassuring thread. She had been guided for this moment all her life, trained to navigate the currents of alpha energy, to recognize the subtle shifts in emotion that signaled openness or resistance. And though Alaric's defenses were formidable, she sensed the first cracks forming. Small, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. "You fear what I can do," she said softly, voice barely above the wind. "You fear what you may feel, what may awaken, what may change. But you cannot fight what has already begun. The threads of your soul respond to my presence whether you acknowledge it or not." Alaric stopped again, amber eyes narrowing, a frown creasing his forehead. And if I resist, then I will wait, she said, unwavering. I will wait as long as it takes. I will not abandon you. That is my vow. The weight of her promise settled between them like a tangible force. Alaric felt a pull, subtle yet insistent, as though the very fabric of his being recognized the truth in her words. A spark of trust, fragile and tentative, ignited within the labyrinth of his fractured soul. He had not allowed trust for centuries. He had not allowed connection. And yet, here it was, offered freely without demand, without fear. For the first time in 1,000 years, Alaric allowed himself to acknowledge it. He did not speak, did not gesture. He simply felt, an awareness dawning that the journey ahead would not be easy, yet perhaps for the first time worth undertaking. Ilara stepped closer, allowing the light of the moon to illuminate her presence fully. Her violet eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. "And I will be here for every step of it." Alaric's chest tightened, a sensation both terrifying and intoxicating. He had spent centuries perfecting the art of isolation, yet in her unwavering gaze, he felt the faintest tremor of hope. The shadow that had ruled his life for a millennium quivered in the presence of her light. And so, in the stillness of the pre-dawn battlement, a delicate dance began. The Alpha King, fractured and wary, and the Omega, steadfast and luminous, standing at the edge of destiny. The path forward would be perilous, filled with trials that would test their very essence. Yet in that moment, a bond had been forged, subtle yet profound, promising the slow unraveling of centuries of pain, and the awakening of a love that neither time nor curse could diminish. Outside, the moon traced its final arc across the sky, a silent witness to the beginning of an extraordinary journey. And though Alaric could not yet see it, the threads of his fragmented soul had already begun to respond, stirred by the unwavering light of the Omega who refused to leave his side. The obsidian realm had grown restless with the dawn, though no one dared speak of it. Even the winds seemed hesitant to stir across the jagged battlements, as if the world itself held its breath for what was to come. Alaric Varen, Alpha King and Eternal Shadow, moved through the corridors of his fortress with a predator's precision, senses sharp, body taut. He had lived countless centuries in solitude, the throne a monument to both power and torment. And yet, the presence of the Omega, Ilara, gnawed at him like an unrelenting tide. He had not seen her sleep, had not witnessed her in moments of unguarded vulnerability, but the impact she carried into his world was undeniable. Every glance, every soft step, every whisper of voice reached him with the force of a blade. She did not flinch at his ferocity. She did not recoil from the shadows that clung to him. Instead, she radiated warmth, patience, and a resolve that threatened to unbalance the careful equilibrium he had built around himself. Alaric's claws flexed beneath his gloves as he leaned against the cold stone wall, amber eyes following her from across the hall. She was tending to the small hearth he had allowed to remain lit, a gesture insignificant to most, yet her care struck at something he had thought long dead. The warmth of the fire reflected faintly in her violet eyes, and for a fleeting moment, he glimpsed not just an Omega, but a being capable of seeing him, all of him, without fear. "You are persistent," he growled, his voice low and edged with authority. "Do you not realize the danger you place yourself in by remaining here?" Ilara did not flinch. Her gaze met his steadily, unwavering, a flame of certainty in the dimly lit hall. "I understand every risk," she said softly. "And I accept them. I am not here to be safe. I am here to be with you." The words reverberated through him, igniting a storm that he could neither control nor ignore. His instincts, honed through millennia of survival and combat, screamed at him to assert dominance, to remind her that she was in the presence of a being she could not tame. Yet beneath that instinct was something unfamiliar, a flicker of curiosity, of desire, of connection he had long believed impossible. Alaric stepped forward, close enough for the heat of his presence to brush against her skin. The tension in the air was palpable, thick as the shadows clinging to the corners of the room. "And what if I am not the man you think I am?" he asked, voice low, dangerous. "What if you awaken something that cannot be undone? What then?" Ilara's eyes did not waver. "Then I will endure," she said simply. "I will endure because you are worth it. Because you deserve to be whole, and I will not turn away from you." He studied her, noting the softness in her expression, the determination etched into her features. The words were dangerous, imbued with power he had long believed lost. And yet they drew him in, tempting him with the faintest promise of connection. He could feel the first cracks forming in the armor he had spent centuries perfecting, the first tremors of vulnerability beneath the unyielding surface of his being. "You speak as though trust is simple," he said finally, his voice tense. "But trust is a luxury I cannot afford. I have been betrayed, abandoned, and cursed beyond measure. How do you intend to survive the reality of what I am?" "I do not ask for your trust to come easily," Ilara replied, her tone unwavering. "I only ask for you to allow me to try, to allow me to see the man beneath the shadows. That is all I ask. No demands, no illusions." Her calm defiance struck him like a blade. For centuries, no one had approached him with such clarity, such certainty, without fear or hesitation. And now, faced with the unwavering light of her presence, he felt an unfamiliar tremor, the first real stirrings of emotion he had not experienced in a millennium. Alaric's amber eyes darkened as he moved closer, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. His instincts screamed to test her, to push her away, to remind her of the danger she courted. But curiosity and something deeper, a need he could not yet name, held him in place. "You may think yourself strong," he murmured, voice rough with centuries of isolation. "But even the strongest are broken when faced with what they cannot control." Ilara took a step forward, unafraid, her violet eyes locked on his. "I am not here to control you," she said softly. "I am here to stand with you, to face what comes together." The words struck a chord deep within him, resonating with the fragments of his lost self. For the first time in countless centuries, he felt the weight of possibility, the potential to reclaim what had been lost. And yet, with that flicker of hope came the familiar, terrifying pull of fear. Vulnerability was a dangerous weapon, and allowing her too close could destroy her, or him. Alaric's claws flexed instinctively, a reflex honed over millennia, and yet he did not strike. Instead he exhaled, a sound of restrained power, and turned away, pacing the hall. Memories surged unbidden, echoes of laughter long forgotten, touches that had vanished with the centuries, moments of tenderness erased by pain. Each fragment pierced him with both longing and fear, a reminder of what he had lost and what he might never regain. "You are relentless," he said finally, halting his pacing to study her. "I should drive you away. I should end this before it consumes you." "Then I will endure," she said again, a faint smile playing at her lips. "Because I have been called to this. 'Cause I believe in you. Because you are worth every risk, every pain, every moment." Alaric's chest tightened. He could feel the first real stirrings of something he had thought lost forever. Desire, curiosity, a glimmer of hope. Yet alongside it, the fear remained. The fear of losing control, of allowing himself to be seen, of opening the door to a vulnerability that could destroy him. "You will be tested," he said finally, voice low, almost a growl. "And I will not make it easy. I will push you to your limits, to see if you can survive me." "I do not fear your tests," she said softly. "I only fear leaving you before you are ready to allow yourself to be whole." The words lingered between them, a delicate thread weaving through the tension, binding them together in a moment both fragile and profound. Alaric felt the first true crack form in the wall he had spent centuries building around his heart. And though he did not yet know how to navigate it, he could feel the warmth of possibility, a spark that threatened to ignite the shadows he had carried for a millennium. In that quiet, charged space, a subtle shift occurred. Alaric Varen, the Alpha King whose soul had been fragmented by centuries of pain and curse, felt the faintest stirrings of emotion, fragile, terrifying, and intoxicating. And in the unwavering light of Alara's presence, he began to understand that perhaps, for the first time in 1,000 years, he was not alone. The journey ahead would be perilous. The curse that had haunted him for centuries would not relent, and the shadows of his past would rise to challenge them both. But in the small, almost imperceptible flicker of connection between them, a seed of hope had taken root, a seed that would grow, painfully and beautifully, into the possibility of healing, of love, of wholeness. As the first light of dawn touched the jagged battlements, Alara stepped closer, her presence unwavering, her eyes fixed on him with quiet determination. And though Alaric could not yet name it, he knew the journey had begun, a journey that would test every fragment of his being and every ounce of her devotion. Somewhere deep within, the first threads of his broken soul began to respond, drawn toward the light she carried. And though the path would be long, filled with peril and resistance, it had begun. Thanks for staying with us. Hit that subscribe button so we can keep bringing you thrilling tales every day. The halls of the Obsidian Realm were silent, save for the soft crackle of the fire that Alara had tended with careful precision. Its warmth spread through the chamber, small and insistent, a stark contrast to the pervasive chill that had long defined Alaric's existence. He sat upon his throne, rigid and unyielding, yet beneath the surface, the first subtle shifts were taking place, stirrings of something he had believed impossible: vulnerability. Alara moved quietly, her violet eyes scanning the chamber, absorbing the history of shadows and echoes of centuries. She had spent time studying him from afar before stepping fully into his world, learning to navigate the weight of his presence, the intensity of his aura. And now, standing within the intimate confines of his throne chamber, she could feel the tremors of change emanating from him. Pieces of a soul thought irretrievably broken were beginning to stir. "You look different in the light," she murmured softly, approaching the throne with measured steps. "Not less formidable, not weaker, but a human." Alaric's amber eyes flicked toward her, narrowed and guarded. "Human is a luxury I cannot afford," he said, voice low, edged with centuries of bitterness. "Strength is survival. Humanity is vulnerability. And vulnerability is fatal." She shook her head, stepping closer, the warmth of her presence brushing against the cold air that clung to him. "Not when it is shared," she said gently. "Not when someone sees you, really sees you, and still chooses to stay." The words, tender yet unwavering, cut deeper than any blade he had faced in battle. For centuries, he had believed he was beyond connection, beyond love, beyond hope. And yet, here she was, an omega, ordinary to the world yet extraordinary to him, shining a light on the shadows he had carried for millennia. Alaric rose from the throne, moving toward her instinctively, a predator aware of danger yet inexplicably drawn. His claws flexed, his senses alert to the slightest movement, the subtlest breath. And yet he did not strike. He did not push her away. Something within him, an echo, a fragment long buried, recognized the truth in her presence. "You persist," he murmured, amber eyes studying her every detail. "Do you not realize how fragile this thread is?" "It is not fragile," she said softly, her gaze unwavering. "It is alive. It responds to you, to the fragments you have hidden even from yourself. And I will not break it. I will nurture it." A tension thrummed through the room, thick and palpable, as Alaric's centuries-hardened walls quivered. Memories, shattered, painful, yet achingly familiar, began to surface. Laughter long forgotten, touches stolen by time, voices that had once brought comfort. Each fragment pressed against the edges of his consciousness, a jigsaw slowly assembling under her steady hands. He paced, restless, struggling against the tide of emotions that threatened to undo him. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to deny, to protect the parts of himself that had been buried so deeply. And yet, her presence was a constant, gentle force, a reminder that not all light could be extinguished, not all connection was lost. "You feel it, don't you?" she whispered, stepping closer, close enough that the heat of her presence brushed his own. "The pieces of you, they're responding. Me. Thus. To what could be." Alaric's fists clenched at his sides, his chest tightening with a mix of fear and fascination. He had long believed that emotion was a weapon too dangerous to wield, that any semblance of attachment could be exploited, twisted, destroyed. And yet, here it was, stirring within him, delicate and terrifying, threatening to pull him into a world he had long abandoned. "You speak of wholeness," he murmured, voice rough, low, almost disbelieving. "Wholeness is an illusion. I have survived for a millennium with pieces of myself missing. That is reality." "Then let me help you make reality bearable," she said, her tone unwavering. "Not by erasing the shadows, not by pretending they do not exist, but by standing beside you, allowing you to embrace the fragments and the whole at the same time." He faltered, the first real crack in his armor appearing in centuries. He had faced enemies who sought his life, betrayers who sought his throne, even the curse that had splintered his soul itself. But nothing had unsettled him like the gentle insistence of one ordinary Omega who refused to turn away. Alaric stepped closer to her, the distance between them narrowing, yet a chasm remained, one of fear, of past pain, of the curse that lingered within him. He felt the fragments of himself, memories of love, warmth, and trust, rise to the surface, brushing against the edges of his consciousness, hesitant yet undeniable. And with each stir he felt something new, the terrifying, intoxicating pull of possibility. "Why do you persist?" he asked finally, voice roughened by emotion he scarcely recognized. "What drives you to risk everything for a man who has been broken for 1,000 years?" "Because you are worth it," she said simply. "Because I see you, not the shadow the world fears, but the man beneath. And because I believe that even the most shattered soul can learn to beat again." The honesty in her words struck him profoundly. He could feel the first pulse of something he had long thought dead, hope. The fragments of his soul, once scattered and dormant, began to resonate in subtle harmony, drawn toward the unwavering presence of the Omega who refused to abandon him. Alaric's amber eyes softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through centuries of stoic dominance. He had not allowed himself to feel this in millennia, an emotion neither pain nor anger, but something unfamiliar and delicate, a fragile warmth that threatened to overwhelm him. "You speak as though it is simple," he murmured, taking another tentative step toward her. "But it is not. The curse, the centuries of solitude, the fragments, they are not easily mended." "No," she admitted, stepping even closer, until their shoulders almost brushed. "They are not. But they can be embraced, acknowledged, and nurtured. And I will not leave you alone in the darkness. Not now, not ever." Alaric's chest tightened further, a shiver of anticipation and fear running down his spine. The walls he had spent centuries building around his heart were crumbling, piece by piece, under the weight of her presence. And though he did not yet know the outcome, he felt the first real stirrings of something he had long believed lost, the possibility of connection, of trust, of love. For the first time in a millennium, he allowed himself to pause, to breathe, to truly see her, to see not just the Omega before him, but the embodiment of hope and light that had entered his shadowed existence. The fragments of his soul, once isolated and cold, began to shift, subtly aligning with the warmth she radiated. And though the process was painful and frightening, it was undeniable. Pieces of Alaric Varen were beginning to stir, responding to the unwavering light of Alara. "You are dangerous," he murmured finally, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at his lips. "Not because of your strength, but because you make me feel something I have long thought impossible. And that is why I am here," she replied softly, her hand reaching out tentatively, not to claim but to offer. "To remind you that even in darkness there can be light. Even in fragments there can be wholeness. And even the most broken hearts can learn to beat again." Alaric's breath caught, a shiver running through him as he felt the first true connection he had experienced in 1,000 years. The fragments of his soul, once scattered and silent, responded subtly, stirring toward her presence. The process was slow, agonizing, yet miraculous. Each moment with her, each word, each gentle act of understanding, became a thread weaving him back together, one delicate piece at a time. And though he did not yet know the full path to healing, he understood one undeniable truth. The Omega who had entered his life carried the power to awaken the Alpha King within him, not through dominance or force, but through patience, devotion, and unwavering love. The dawn crept over the horizon, brushing the jagged spires of the obsidian realm with the faintest glow. And within the throne chamber, a fragile yet profound transformation had begun. The Alpha King, fractured for a millennium, felt the first whispers of wholeness stir within his soul, drawn inexorably toward the unwavering light of the Omega who refused to leave him. For the first time in centuries, Alaric allowed himself to hope. The obsidian realm hummed with a quiet, almost imperceptible energy. The shadows that had clung to Alaric's halls for centuries seemed less oppressive, as though acknowledging that something extraordinary had begun. Even the walls, jagged and blackened with age, seemed to breathe with the rhythm of possibility. And at the heart of it all, Alaric Varen, Alpha King and Eternal Shadow, felt something he had not dared to imagine in a millennium. Fragments of his soul shifting, aligning, responding to a force beyond power or dominance, a force that had a name, Ilara. She stood before him, radiant even in the dim light of the chamber, her violet eyes steady and unwavering. Every movement she made was measured, deliberate, yet graceful. It was in her presence, her quiet certainty, that the first true stirrings of awakening in his fragmented soul began to coalesce. He could feel them, tiny pulses, hesitant yet insistent, tugging at the edges of his awareness, urging him to acknowledge what had been buried for centuries. "You feel it, don't you?" she asked softly, stepping closer, the warmth of her presence brushing against him like a lifeline. "The threads. They are beginning to respond. Your soul is waking, piece by piece, and I am here to guide it, not control it." Alaric's amber eyes flicked toward her, wary yet drawn. "And if I falter?" he asked, voice rough, almost unrecognizable even to himself. "If I lose control? If the fragments resist? Then I will not abandon you," she said, unwavering. "I will stand with you through every fragment, every memory, every piece of who you are. You will not face this alone." Her words resonated within him in a way that even centuries of solitude and dominance could not suppress. He had been fractured by the weight of millennia, by betrayals, by the curse that had claimed pieces of his essence. And yet, her presence ignited something delicate, something dangerous, something he could not name. It was a stir of connection, a hint of warmth, a whisper of a life he had long thought impossible to reclaim. Alaric moved toward her instinctively, his steps cautious yet deliberate. His fingers flexed, the muscles in his chest tight, but he did not strike. He did not push her away. He simply allowed her near, allowing the faintest trace of trust to seep into the cracks of his defenses. "You are brave," he murmured almost to himself as he circled her, his gaze intense. "Foolishly brave. To step into the darkness and not be consumed. And you are afraid," she said softly, meeting his gaze without flinching. afraid to see yourself whole, afraid to let the fragments speak. But they are part of you, Alaric. They always were. And I will not let fear keep you from reclaiming them. Her words struck him with a force he could not deny. Memories, fragmented and scattered, began to surface. Small flashes of moments lost to centuries of shadow. A hand brushing his, a laugh shared under sunlight long forgotten, the warmth of someone caring without expectation. Each memory was a delicate spark, fragile yet undeniable, and each pulled at the edges of his awareness, tugging him toward something he had long believed unattainable: connection, trust, and perhaps love. Alaric's chest tightened as he felt the first real resonance within his soul. The shards, once isolated and cold, now vibrating subtly in harmony with the light she carried. It was a sensation both terrifying and intoxicating, a reminder that he had not been complete for centuries, that he had been a shadow of himself, a king stripped of wholeness. "You awaken me," he murmured finally, voice low, roughened with emotion he scarcely recognized. "Not in the way others have, but truly, painfully, beautifully." Ilara's lips curved into a gentle, almost imperceptible smile. "Because you allowed it," she said softly. "Because you are willing to let the fragments breathe. Because you have the courage to face what you have hidden for so long. And because you are worth it, every part of you." The Alpha King's jaw tightened. He had not allowed himself to feel such vulnerability in centuries. The notion that someone could see him, all of him, and not recoil was staggering. The fragments of his soul trembled in response, drawn to her unwavering presence, resonating with a harmony he had long thought impossible. Alaric paced the chamber, each step deliberate, each movement a test of his growing courage. Memories continued to surface, painful, joyous, fleeting, each one a thread connecting him to the man he had once been and could still become. He felt rage, sorrow, longing, and desire intertwine in a dizzying storm, each emotion tempered by the steady anchor of Ilara's presence. "You will be tested," he said finally, stopping before her. His amber eyes intense. "The fragments, they are not mine to command, and the curse, it will not yield easily. Are you prepared to face what comes?" "I am," she said softly, unwavering. "Because I will not leave. Because I have chosen this path, and because I believe in you. And if you falter, I will be here to guide you back, piece by piece, until you are whole." Alaric exhaled, a sound of both relief and tension, the first genuine release he had felt in centuries. The fragments of his soul stirred more strongly now, responding to her presence, resonating with the light she carried, and awakening the alpha within him. He felt a profound shift, not just in himself, but in the dynamic between them, the delicate interplay of trust, vulnerability, and connection that would define their journey. "Do you not fear me?" he asked, voice quieter now, tinged with uncertainty. "Do you not see the danger I carry, the shadows I command, the curse that clings to every fiber of my being?" "I do," she said softly, stepping closer, until the faintest brush of her hand against his arm sent a tremor through him. "And I accept it. Not in spite of it, but because of it. The darkness is part of you, Alaric. And I do not seek to erase it. I seek to stand with it, to face it with you, and to remind you that even in the deepest shadow, light can exist." The resonance within him deepened, the shards of his soul aligning slowly, painfully, yet unmistakably. The fragments, once silent and cold, now hummed with recognition, responding to the unwavering devotion she exuded. Alaric felt the stirrings of life within him, not the survival-driven existence of centuries past, but a conscious, living awakening of his alpha essence, tempered by vulnerability, shaped by trust, and guided by the presence of the Omega who refused to leave. "You awaken something dangerous," he murmured finally, his voice low, rough, and almost tender. "Something I am not sure I am ready to face." "Then we will face it together," she said softly. "Piece by piece, fragment by fragment. There is no need to face it alone, not when we can face it side by side. And so, in the quiet of the obsidian realm, under the faint glow of the moonlight filtering through shattered windows, Alaric Varen took the first steps toward awakening, not just as a king, not just as an alpha, but as a man beginning to reclaim the wholeness he had been denied for a millennium. The fragments of his soul, once scattered and silent, began to hum in harmony with her presence, responding to the unwavering light of the Omega who had dared to enter his shadowed world. And though the path ahead would be fraught with peril, resistance, and the ever-lurking curse, the Alpha King's journey toward reclamation had truly begun. For the first time in centuries, Alaric allowed himself to hope, not blindly, not naively, but with the cautious certainty of a soul slowly mending. And in the steady, luminous presence of Alara, the Omega who refused to abandon him, he felt the stirrings of a future he had long believed impossible, one of wholeness, connection, and love. Wow, you're still here. That's amazing. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. It inspires us to create more stories just for you. The Obsidian Realm had never felt so alive, and so threatening simultaneously. Shadows moved along the jagged walls like living serpents, their whispers curling around the edges of Alaric's consciousness, taunting him with echoes of pain, betrayal, and the centuries of isolation he had endured. The curse that had fractured his soul for a millennium was stirring, sensing the subtle shifts brought on by Alara's presence. Alaric stood at the highest battlement, amber eyes scanning the horizon as if the darkness itself could be challenged. His body hummed with a tension he had not felt in centuries, power tempered by fear, strength laced with uncertainty. And yet he was not alone. Ilara's violet eyes met his across the distance, unwavering, steady, and resolute. Her presence was a beacon, a tether keeping him anchored even as the shadows surged. "You feel it," she said softly, her voice carrying over the wind. "The curse. It knows the fragments are returning. It will strike Alaric. It will test you, try to pull everything back into the void." "I know," he murmured, jaw tight, amber eyes narrowing. "And I will not allow it. Not now. Not with you here." Her hand found his, light yet insistent, grounding him. The connection sparked through him, and for the first time, the Alpha King did not recoil from touch, did not flinch from warmth. Instead, he felt the fragments of his soul, once scattered and silent, pulse in recognition, resonating with the strength of her unwavering presence. The wind shifted suddenly, colder, sharper, and with it came the unmistakable weight of the curse, the ancient darkness that had haunted him for a millennium. Shadows lengthened and twisted, moving with intent, coiling around the battlements, seeking to isolate, to terrify, to fracture again what was only beginning to mend. Alaric's claws flexed instinctively, muscles tensing as his alpha instincts flared. The shadows hissed, whispers of pain and despair threading into his mind. The curse knew his weaknesses, knew his fears, and it would exploit them if given the chance. "I will face it," he said, voice low, commanding, yet tempered with something new, vulnerability tempered by trust. "I will not allow it to take me, or us, apart." Ilara's hand tightened around his, grounding him. "You are not alone," she said softly, eyes fixed on his. "We face it together. Let the fragments guide you. Let the light within you fight the darkness. I am here." The shadows surged then, a living tide of darkness that coiled around him, trying to draw him back into the void, to pull apart the threads of his awakening soul. But Alaric did not falter. For the first time in centuries, he did not retreat. Instead, he inhaled deeply, feeling the power of the fragments, the pulse of life returning to his being, and the unwavering devotion of the Omega at his side. The battle was as much internal as it was external. Memories of betrayal, loss, and despair assaulted him, clawing at the edges of his consciousness. The whispers were relentless, attempting to drown out the present with echoes of the past. And yet, each time the shadows struck, the fragments of his soul resonated, drawing strength from Alara's presence. "You are stronger than it knows," she whispered, pressing close, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. "Stronger than the curse. Stronger than the shadows. I see the Alpha within you, Alaric. Let him rise." He felt it then, a surge of power, not brute force but something deeper. The Alpha essence, tempered by centuries of pain and now guided by hope and connection, began to awaken fully. Each fragment of his soul, once isolated, now pulsed in unison, a chorus of resilience that pushed back the darkness. The curse hissed, recoiling from the unexpected unity, but it was relentless, striking again, testing every ounce of his newfound strength. Alaric's amber eyes blazed as he faced the shadows, his stance unyielding, muscles coiled with controlled power. "You will not claim me," he growled, voice resonant with authority, strength, and something far more profound: ownership of self, reclaiming what had been lost. "I am whole. And she is with me." The shadows faltered, the whispers breaking into fragmented echoes, unable to contend with the alignment of his soul and the unwavering light of Alara. Each surge of darkness met with a pulse of strength, a resonance of fragments, a tether of devotion that could not be severed. Alara's hand remained clasped in his, her presence unwavering, her eyes fierce yet filled with tenderness. "Together," she said, voice steady, carrying the promise of safety and hope. "You are not alone." With a final, commanding motion, Alaric exhaled, drawing on every fragment of his soul, every memory reclaimed, every pulse of awakening within him. The shadows recoiled, unable to penetrate the newfound unity of his being. The curse, ancient and relentless, hissed one last time before retreating into the void from which it had emerged, defeated, not destroyed, but held at bay by the power of a reweaving soul and the unyielding light of the Omega who refused to leave. Alaric fell to one knee, chest heaving, amber eyes shining not with anger or despair, but with a profound mixture of relief, awe, and something far more dangerous, love. The fragments of his soul, once scattered and silent, pulsed in harmony, a testament to the awakening of the Alpha he had long believed lost. Alara stepped closer, pressing her forehead gently against his, her hand resting lightly over his heart. "You are whole," she whispered. "Not because the shadows were defeated, but because you allowed yourself to rise above them. Because you trusted, because you endured, because you believed." Alaric's hands found hers, their connection electric yet grounding, a thread of life woven between them. "I feared I would never feel whole again," he murmured, voice low, hoarse with emotion. "I feared I would always be this fragment, this shadow. And yet, here I am. Wait. Alive. Because of you." "You were never truly alone," she said softly, a tear tracing her cheek. "I was here all along, waiting for the moment you were ready to let the pieces align. And now, look at what you have become. Look at us." The Alpha King rose slowly, strength and authority radiating from him, tempered by vulnerability and guided by devotion. He held her close, not possessively, but reverently, honoring the delicate bond that had been forged through pain, patience, and unwavering love. The fragments of his soul, once cold and scattered, now resonated fully, vibrant and strong, a testament to the reclamation of a life long thought lost. "Together," he whispered, voice low, firm, and unyielding. "We are stronger than any shadow, any curse. I will protect this, protect us, and I will not let it fall apart again." Alara smiled, a radiant, unwavering beacon in the aftermath of chaos. "Then let us walk forward, Alaric. Not as king and Omega, not as master and follower, but as two souls who have reclaimed themselves together." And so, on the battlements of the Obsidian realm, with the first light of dawn brushing the jagged towers, the Alpha King and his Omega stood united. The shadows had tested them, the curse had threatened to pull them apart, yet the fragments of his soul had aligned, resonating with the unwavering devotion and love that Alara carried. For the first time in a millennium, Alaric Varen allowed himself to feel whole. And beside him, the Omega, who had never wavered in her belief, stood as both anchor and light, guiding him into a future where connection, love, and wholeness were no longer forbidden, but embraced. The kingdom watched in quiet awe, sensing the shift, not merely of power but of essence. The Alpha King, once fractured and lost, now reclaimed his soul, not as a solitary ruler, but as a man reborn, guided by love and strengthened by unity. And in that unity, the obsidian realm began to breathe again, the darkness retreating, the light taking its first cautious hold, and the fragments of a once shattered soul singing in harmony with the unwavering heart of an Omega who had dared to love without fear. The first light of dawn painted the obsidian realm in hues of gold and silver, chasing away centuries of shadow and despair. The jagged battlements, once cold and forbidding, now reflected the warmth of a sun rising on a new era. Within the grand hall of the throne, Alaric Varen, Alpha King and once fractured soul, stood with an authority that no force could challenge. Not because he commanded fear, but because he had reclaimed himself. Ilara stepped forward, her violet eyes steady and unwavering, her hand finding his as naturally as if it had always belonged there. The air between them was alive with unspoken understanding, a delicate balance of power and vulnerability, of strength and trust. She had been the anchor, the light, and the catalyst for the fragments of his soul to align. Now, those fragments hummed in unison, resonating with the full magnitude of his alpha essence. "You are whole," she whispered, pressing her forehead gently against his. "Not just in body, not just in title, but in spirit. Every piece of you has returned." Alaric's amber eyes softened as he looked at her, and in that gaze was the reflection of a soul reclaimed, tempered by centuries of pain, yet shining with newfound clarity. "Because of you," he said, voice low, resonant yet tender. "Because you never left. Because you believed when I could not. Because you showed me that I am more than shadows and fragments." The court waited in silence, sensing the shift in their ruler. Alaric's presence was no longer defined by intimidation or fear. It radiated a rare combination of power and compassion, a balanced essence that inspired loyalty without demanding it. His reign, long overshadowed by solitude and curse, now promised wisdom, protection, and an unprecedented empathy that spoke to the hearts of his people. He turned slowly, scanning the assembled members of the kingdom, each of whom felt the tangible shift in his being. The Alpha King, who had been fractured, who had endured betrayal, pain, and isolation for a millennium, now radiated wholeness. A man who had confronted the darkness within and reclaimed himself, guided by the unwavering devotion of his Omega. "Ilara," he murmured, stepping closer, their hands entwined. "Stand with me. Not as an accessory to my throne, but as the equal I have learned to trust, to need, to love." Her lips curved into a soft, confident smile. "Always," she said, voice steady, a promise as firm as the foundation of the kingdom itself. "Not as part of your shadow, but as part of your light. Together." Alaric allowed himself to exhale fully for the first time in centuries. The tension that had defined him, the tight coil of distrust, the relentless vigilance against betrayal, the constant fear of losing the fragments of his soul, dissolved in the presence of the Omega who had never faltered. Each fragment, once cold and silent, now pulsed in harmonious resonance, a living testament to their union. The throne chamber, long a place of isolation, now felt alive. Sunlight spilled across the polished obsidian floors, glinting against the walls that had once echoed only with whispers of pain. Alaric's footsteps were steady as he approached the dais, each step a deliberate declaration of his reclaimed self. Shadows still lingered in the corners, but they were no longer threats. They were reminders of what had been overcome, echoes of a past that had shaped, but would no longer define him. "Today marks not just the return of the Alpha King," Alaric announced, voice carrying across the chamber, firm yet imbued with warmth, but the beginning of a reign guided by unity, understanding, and the strength that comes from embracing every fragment of oneself. We rise not in fear, but in trust. Not in shadows, but in light. The court erupted in cautious applause, their faces reflecting awe, hope, and relief. The legend of the Alpha King who had endured a millennium of torment and emerged whole was being written anew, not through conquest, but through the reclamation of self and the profound bond with his Omega. Ilara stepped beside him, her hand resting over his, a tangible reminder that he was not alone. Together they embodied a union that was both rare and extraordinary, a partnership built on patience, devotion, and a love that had defied ancient curses, primal instincts, and millennia of despair. "Your Majesty," one of the elder advisors spoke, voice trembling slightly. "Your aura, it has changed. The darkness that once clung to you has receded. You are whole. And your presence, your essence, it inspires. We have not seen such balance, such power tempered with compassion in generations." Alaric nodded, amber eyes sweeping the hall. "It is not my power alone that defines this kingdom," he said quietly. "It is the union of strength and trust, of courage and vulnerability. And it begins with one truth, that even the most shattered souls can reclaim themselves, if given the chance, and if guided by unwavering love." A hush fell over the chamber as the court absorbed the words, the magnitude of the moment pressing in. Alaric's journey had not been simple, nor had it been without suffering, yet the king now standing before them was a living testament to the transformative power of devotion, patience, and connection. Every fragment of his fractured soul had found resonance, and in that resonance lay both authority and grace. Ilara lifted her gaze, eyes locking with his, and in that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. "Alaric," she whispered, "we have walked through shadows, faced curses, and endured the weight of centuries. And yet, here we are, whole, together." He took a deep breath, feeling the final threads of fear dissolve in the warmth of her presence. "Yes," he said, voice low yet carrying across the hall, "whole, and together. Let this be the foundation of everything we build. From this day forward, our kingdom, our people, and our souls shall thrive in the light we create together." The court erupted in cheers, not for conquest, not for intimidation, but for the reclamation of a soul and the promise of a reign founded on trust, unity, and the transformative power of love. The obsidian realm, once cold, jagged, and foreboding, now radiated possibility. The Alpha King, whole at last, stood as a beacon of hope, not a shadowed ruler commanding fear, but a living testament to the courage required to reclaim oneself and the bonds that make wholeness possible. Alaric turned toward Ilara, their hands still intertwined. "We have faced shadows together," he murmured, amber eyes alight with warmth and power. "We have survived what centuries could not break. And now, we will shape the future, not as fragments, but as a unified force. As King and Omega, yes, but more importantly, as partners, as equals, as the guardians of a legacy forged through love, courage, and resilience." Ilara smiled, a radiant beacon against the first golden light of dawn. "And our legacy begins now," she whispered. "Together." Alaric's gaze swept over the horizon, the kingdom, the spires catching the first rays of sun. He inhaled deeply, the fragments of his soul vibrating in unison, a song of resilience, of awakening, of life reclaimed. The darkness of centuries still lingered at the edges, but it no longer defined him. It was a reminder of the path walked, of the trials overcome, of the love that had guided him through the abyss. "Let the world see," he said finally, voice steady, resonant, unwavering. "We rise not as a fractured king, but as a unified soul. Let the obsidian realm thrive, not in fear, but in light. Let every shadow witness the strength born from love, devotion, and the courage to face the fragments within. And let every heart know that wholeness is possible." Ilara pressed her forehead to his again, their hands clasped tightly, a silent acknowledgement of everything endured, everything reclaimed, and everything yet to come. In the quiet aftermath, the Alpha King and his Omega stood together, not as ruler and subject, not as predator and protector, but as equals, as partners, as the embodiment of a love that could overcome even the most ancient curses. The Obsidian Realm, once a monument to isolation and despair, now pulsed with life. Shadows no longer commanded dominion. They receded, respecting the power of a soul reclaimed and the unyielding light of love that had guided it. The Alpha King, whole at last, radiated not only authority, but a profound empathy that would shape the reign to come. And in that union, that reclamation, the kingdom found hope. Not the fragile hope born of fleeting chance, but the enduring hope born of resilience, devotion, and the transformative power of an unwavering heart. Alaric Varen, Alpha King, stood reclaimed, unified, and awakened. And beside him Ilara, the Omega who had refused to abandon him, stood as both anchor and light, guiding not just a king, but a kingdom, toward a future forged in love, courage, and unbreakable unity. Thanks for staying with us. Hit that subscribe button so we can keep bringing you thrilling tales every day. The Obsidian Realm had begun to change. It was subtle at first. Softened edges where jagged stone had once dominated, sunlit corridors where shadows had lingered, and the gentle hum of life pulsing through the halls that had long known only silence and fear. The kingdom had felt the shift in its ruler, the Alpha King who had endured a millennium of torment and emerged whole, tempered not by cruelty, but by love, trust, and the courage to reclaim his fragmented soul. Alaric moved through his people with a presence that commanded respect without demanding it. Amber eyes, once cold and distant, now glimmered with warmth and understanding. Every gesture, every word, resonated with authority intertwined with empathy. He listened, guided, and protected, not merely as a sovereign, but as a guardian of a legacy he had been reborn to nurture. Ilara walked beside him, her hand often brushing his, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had transformed not only their hearts, but the very foundation of the kingdom. She had not merely been the Omega who healed him. She had become his equal, his anchor, and the living testament to the power of unwavering devotion. Together, they embodied a union that radiated hope, courage, and a love strong enough to rewrite centuries of pain. The citizens watched with awe and reverence. Where whispers of fear and shadow had once lingered, there was now a tangible sense of hope. Word spread quickly. The Alpha King, fractured for a millennium, had been reclaimed not through war, not through dominance, but through love. A love so profound it had transcended curses, primal instincts, and time itself. Courts, once tense and wary, now thrived on collaboration. Advisors spoke freely, knowing their king would listen, weigh their counsel, and act with both wisdom and fairness. Soldiers, who had trained under the shadow of a ruler tempered by fear, now found themselves inspired, motivated not by dread, but by the example of resilience and unity demonstrated by their sovereign. Even the most fractured and hesitant citizens began to see possibilities, dreams long buried now daring to surface. Alaric and Ilara's bond was at the heart of this transformation. Their love was no longer a private sanctuary. It was a beacon, a living symbol of what could be achieved when courage and devotion converged. And while their union had begun as the quiet, steadfast work of mending a fractured soul, it had grown into a force that touched every corner of their world. In council chambers and marketplaces, in training grounds and schools, the story of their journey spread, whispered at first, then proclaimed openly. The Alpha King who had faced shadows alone for a millennium had been reclaimed by an Omega who refused to abandon him. Together they had demonstrated that wholeness was possible, that vulnerability was not weakness, and that love could challenge even the most ancient of curses. But their legacy was not built on tales alone. It was forged through action, through the intentional reshaping of the kingdom to reflect the lessons they had learned. Compassion tempered with strength, unity tempered with individuality, and power guided by love. Structures once imposing and cold were softened, gardens bloomed in courtyards long abandoned, and halls resonated with laughter and song where silence had reigned for centuries. Alaric often found himself walking among his people, feeling the pulse of life that he had once thought inaccessible. Children, unafraid, approached him, sensing the gentle strength beneath his formidable presence. Farmers, merchants, and scholars alike sought his guidance, finding in him not just authority, but wisdom earned through pain and tempered by the unyielding devotion of the Omega who had reclaimed him. And always Ilara was beside him, quiet, radiant, and steady. She did not merely stand as a reminder of what had been reclaimed. She stood as a partner, an equal, and a guide. Where Alaric exuded authority, she carried empathy. Where he radiated strength, she carried understanding. Together they were a balance, a unity that demonstrated the profound truth of their journey. That love, when steadfast and courageous, could reshape not only hearts but kingdoms. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the obsidian realm in shades of gold and violet, Alaric and Ilara stood upon the highest balcony. The wind tousled their hair, carrying the distant sounds of life, the laughter of children, the soft murmur of citizens, the harmonious rhythm of a kingdom awakening. "Do you see it?" Ilara asked, her voice soft yet full of pride. "The change we have begun." Alaric's amber eyes scanned the horizon, taking in the transformation of the realm he had once believed lost to shadows. "I see it," he said, voice steady, resonant. "And it is more than I dared hope. Not because of me, but because of us. Because of what we have reclaimed together." She leaned against him, hand pressed to his chest where the fragments of his soul now pulsed in perfect harmony. "It was never just about reclaiming you," she said. "It was about reclaiming what this kingdom could be. About showing that even the darkest hearts can heal, that even the deepest shadows can give way to light." Alaric tightened his arm around her, feeling the weight and warmth of her presence. "And it begins with the fragments," he murmured. "Every piece of my soul, once scattered, now resonates because of the devotion, courage, and love you offered. The kingdom feels that resonance too. They feel it in every action we take, every choice we make, every life we touch." Their hands intertwined, fingers laced, a tangible symbol of unity and partnership. "The legacy," Ilara said, "is not in statues or stories, but in every life we influence, every heart we touch, every shadow we help light." Alaric nodded, amber eyes reflecting both pride and humility. "Yes, our legacy is the proof that wholeness is possible. That love, when steadfast and courageous, can transcend even the most ancient curses, even the weight of centuries. And that each of us, Alpha, Omega, citizen, ruler, has the power to reclaim what was lost, to mend what was broken, to inspire what was dormant." The wind carried the words across the balcony, sweeping through the city like a tangible force. Citizens paused, feeling the resonance of their king's declaration, the weight of the love that had guided him back to wholeness. Hope long dormant stirred within them. Possibility, once dismissed as a dream, became tangible. And in that moment, the obsidian realm was reborn, not just in stone and spire but in spirit. Alaric looked down at Ilara. His expression softened with affection and awe. "We have walked through shadows," he said quietly, "faced curses, confronted pain, and emerged not just whole, but stronger than I ever imagined. And this is only the beginning. Not just for us, but for everything we hold dear." Ilara pressed her forehead to his, her eyes shining with quiet conviction. "Then let us walk forward together, as the guardians of this legacy. Not just for the present, but for every future yet to come. Our love is not just ours, it is the light that will guide the generations that follow." Alaric drew a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the fragments within him, each one singing in harmony with her presence. He had faced darkness, confronted the shadows of centuries, and reclaimed every piece of his soul. And now, standing beside Alara, he felt the true depth of what they had accomplished. A love transcendent, a unity unbreakable, and a legacy eternal. Then we shall leave behind a kingdom worthy of the love and courage that restored it, he said, voice strong and unwavering. A kingdom that honors the fragments, embraces the light, and inspires all who dwell within it. The sun dipped fully below the horizon, leaving a sky painted in deep purples and golds. In the quiet aftermath, the Alpha King and his Omega stood side by side, their hands clasped, their hearts intertwined, their souls unified. The obsidian realm, once defined by shadows and fear, now pulsed with life, hope, and the enduring testament of love that had reclaimed a fractured king. And as the night settled, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, reflecting the light of two souls whose bond would endure beyond centuries, beyond curses, and beyond time itself. Their legacy was not written in stone, but in hearts, and it would echo through generations as the proof that love, courage, and unwavering devotion could conquer even the deepest darkness. The obsidian realm, once a fortress of shadows and despair, had become a beacon of hope. Light spilled over every spire, illuminating streets that had long known only silence and fear. The air carried the scent of renewal, blossoms from newly cultivated gardens, the faint tang of incense in temples, and the hum of life in markets and halls alike. The Alpha King and his Omega had not only reclaimed themselves, but had reshaped the kingdom, leaving a legacy that would endure for generations. Alaric Varen stood at the balcony of the Grand Palace, amber eyes sweeping over the city below. His stance was regal yet relaxed, the unyielding tension of centuries eased by the presence of the woman beside him. Ilara's violet eyes mirrored the golden light of dawn, steady and unwavering, and her hand rested lightly against his arm, a tether as vital as breath. "Do you ever imagine," she asked softly, "how far the echoes of our choices will reach?" Alaric turned his gaze to hers, a small, fond smile tugging at his lips. "I have begun to," he admitted. "Every decision we make, every act of love and courage, resonates beyond ourselves. We reclaimed not just my soul, but the spirit of the entire kingdom. And in doing so, we have set ripples that will continue long after we are gone." Ilara's hand tightened over his, a gentle affirmation. "The people will remember us," she said. "Not just for the throne or the power, but for what we stood for. For the love that restored a fractured king, for the courage that mended hearts, for the hope we nurtured where despair once reigned." Alaric inhaled deeply, feeling the pulse of his unified soul resonate through him, a living testament to what they had endured together. Every fragment, once scattered and silent, now thrummed with life and connection. It was not merely the reclamation of self, it was the reclamation of purpose, of vision, and of the ability to shape a world guided by love and courage. Their days were now filled with the work of legacy. Alaric and Ilara moved through the kingdom, listening, teaching, guiding. They met with scholars to rebuild archives long lost to shadow, with artisans to restore the beauty that had been neglected, and with citizens to hear their stories, their hopes, their dreams. Every encounter reinforced the truth that their love was not a solitary sanctuary, but a force capable of inspiring, protecting, and transforming an entire realm. Children laughed in the streets, unafraid of the Alpha King whose presence once struck fear. Citizens approached Ilara openly, seeking her guidance and comfort. Soldiers trained with renewed vigor, not out of fear of punishment, but inspired by the example of courage tempered with compassion. The obsidian realm thrummed with life, a kingdom alive with hope, guided by the union of an Alpha and his Omega who had reclaimed themselves and each other. One evening, as the sun dipped behind distant mountains, painting the sky in deep hues of purple and gold, Alaric and Ilara walked along the palace gardens, hand in hand. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the scent of blossoms and freshly tilled soil. "Do you ever think," Alaric began, voice quiet, "that someone like me could have imagined this, peace, connection, wholeness, after 1,000 years of shadows? Ilara tilted her head, a soft smile playing on her lips. I think the fact that you doubted it once makes it all the more remarkable that you now live it. You faced every fragment, every curse, every fear. And yet you chose to rise. That choice defines your legacy far more than anything else. Alaric's gaze softened as he looked at her, feeling the weight and warmth of her presence. And you, he murmured, you were the unwavering light, the one who never left, the one who taught me that even the most shattered heart can be made whole. Ilara's eyes shimmered, reflecting both the twilight and the depth of shared experience. We made each other whole, she said softly. Not through force, not through dominance, but through patience, courage, and love. That is what will echo. Our choices, our devotion, our unity. The kingdom was alive with these echoes. Across distant towns, travelers spoke of the Alpha King and his Omega, of a love that had defied curses, survived shadows, and transformed a realm. Schools and halls of learning taught the stories of resilience and unity, of courage guided by devotion, ensuring that future generations understood the power of connection over fear, of love over isolation. Even the natural world seemed to respond. Rivers glistened clearer, forests flourished, and the skies over the obsidian realm shone brighter, reflecting the balance now held within its ruler. Shadows still existed as they always would, but they no longer dominated. They were reminders of what had been overcome, guiding vigilance rather than breeding despair. Alaric and Ilara often returned to the highest balcony, overlooking the kingdom, sensing the pulse of life and hope that flowed through every corner. They spoke of plans, of future endeavors, of ways to nurture the legacy they had forged. And in these quiet moments their bond deepened, evolving beyond love and partnership into something eternal, a shared purpose that transcended both time and circumstance. Every generation will know, Ilara said one night, leaning against his shoulder, that love can restore, that courage can heal, that unity can build. And they will remember not just the king or the Omega, but the bond that transformed a world. Alaric pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, his amber eyes reflecting the starlight. Then our work is not done, he murmured. Not because there is more to conquer, but because there is more to nurture, more to guide, more to protect. And as long as we walk together, there is nothing that can undo what we have built. The stars above seemed to shimmer in response, casting a silver glow over the obsidian realm. The whispers of shadows that had haunted Alaric for a millennium were now quiet, diminished by the strength of love and unity. The fragments of his soul sang in perfect harmony, echoing the eternal promise of devotion and courage that had guided them both. And as they stood together, hand in hand, gazing over the thriving kingdom, they understood that the story of their lives would not end here. Their love, their courage, and their reclaimed souls would ripple outward, touching countless hearts, inspiring hope, and lighting the way for generations yet unborn. Ilara smiled softly, lifting her gaze to meet his. This is just the beginning, she whispered. The future echoes of our hearts will continue to shape the world, long after we are gone. Alaric tightened his hand around hers, amber eyes glowing with quiet determination. Then let every echo remind the world, he said, voice firm and unwavering, that even the most broken hearts can be mended, that even the deepest shadows can yield to light, and that love, true, unwavering love, can conquer all. And so, the Alpha King and his Omega walked forward together, their hearts united, their souls whole, and their legacy immortal. The obsidian realm thrived under their guidance, a kingdom transformed not by fear, but by love, courage, and unwavering devotion. Every fragment of Alaric's soul resonated with the life and light Ilara had restored. Every choice they made shaped a future filled with hope. And in every heart they touched, their story endured, a testament to the power of love that could heal, restore, and transcend even the darkest of curses. For the Alpha King and his Omega, the journey was eternal. Their hearts beat as one, their souls intertwined, and their legacy, born of pain, reclaimed through love, and strengthened by courage, echoed across time, an enduring light that would never fade. In the quiet of the obsidian realm, under the glow of moonlight and starlight alike, two souls, once fractured now whole, stood together. And in that union, the world learned a timeless truth: that wholeness, hope, and love endure when hearts are courageous enough to embrace them. The Alpha King and his Omega have reclaimed themselves and reshaped their world. Subscribe now to continue exploring tales of love, courage, and unbreakable devotion.